On my first day in Sri Lanka, I decided to go for a wetland tour to see some of the local wildlife. I woke up to what I thought was the sound of birds chirping, but it turned out to be this rather noisy squirrel that was afraid of a cat in the neighborhood. And there was this cute little puppy named Jojo at my homestay, which made me miss my dog back home. My first stop was the famous Red Mosque in Colombo, which was kind of odd because it was a religious building, but it was painted in colors that seemed more like a circus pavilion or maybe a candy factory. However, the architectural details and the color scheme did make it pretty interesting. Unfortunately, it was impossible to go inside that day as they were having prayers. But this was actually the only thing I found interesting in Colombo. Most of it was pretty dirty and crowded. So I quickly made my way to the beach and checked out this local shrine while I was waiting for my tour. The wetland tours promised a chance to see the Sri Lankan mugger or swamp crocodile, as well as other wildlife including monkeys and birds and various other river-dwelling creatures. Along the way, I stopped to grab a quick video of this lotus pond because I really liked the visual effect of the lotuses blowing in the wind. The trip started off with us spotting a lot of birds, as this was an estuary and there were a lot of seabirds just kind of like gathering on the islands and fishing from some of the branches that were hanging in the water. Along the way, we spotted a lot of colorful fishing boats that were docked alongside some of the houses as we made our way to the mouth of the river. But unfortunately, there were not very many crocodiles during this time of day. So our guide decided to head up the river away from the city to see if we could spot some bigger crocs. As we cruised further down the river, the vegetation along the bank started looking more and more like a jungle. And occasionally we would find a small tributary to explore, like this one where the water got pretty shallow. This was actually on the way to the guide's house, where he picked up some lunch. As we got farther away from the city, we actually got to see a lot more interesting wildlife. For me, this was one of the coolest things that we spotted on the trip. These trees just full of giant fruit bats, which are kind of creepy looking, but actually quite harmless. There must have been thousands of these bats quite literally hanging out in these trees by the river. I guess they were just resting and waiting for it to get dark. And then finally we spotted the star of the show, the giant mugger crocodile. And although these mugger crocodiles are not nearly as enormous as the saltwater or estuary crocodiles, this guy still looked pretty menacing hanging out in the water. And then a little bit later, we actually saw another crocodile silently cruising along the banks of the river looking for his next meal. And right there, hanging out on the banks of the river, was a tree full of tasty monkeys who seemed to be somewhat oblivious to the danger lurking in the depths below. I think this croc was secretly hoping that one of the monkeys would accidentally fall into the water and we would get to witness a true Nature Channel moment.
Seats are eagles.
But I guess these monkeys actually spotted the crocodile first, and were definitely being a lot more cautious. In fact, some of the babies seemed to be quite terrified of him. But they still look super cute, huddling together for protection in the trees. Eventually, the crocodile submerged and the danger passed, and these monkeys got back to their regular hijinks. And they seemed a lot more interested in the fruit that we had on our boat than they did in the crocodile.
The small one.
Hey.
And even the terrified babies eventually forgot about the crocodile and got back to playing. But there was this one little naughty male monkey that seemed a lot more interested in playing with something else than the fruit or the other monkeys. There was also this one newborn baby that wasn't quite as cute as the older babies. In fact, he looked kind of like a weird alien. His mom had a curiously interesting golden hair comb over.
We look at that alien baby. Look like Donald Trump and Stephen Miller together. Spitting image. We have Donald Trump and Stephen Miller having a snack.
Eventually, even the mom got brave and jumped onto our boat to try to grab a banana. It turned out that the baby had an even funnier haircut than we expected, and some of the other monkeys' ears looked like the weird mushrooms they put in soups in Asia. As the sun started to get low, it was time to head back up the river, back to civilization. As we passed another boat, we noticed the other driver seemed a little bit too young to be driving the boat, but he seemed to be doing pretty good for his first time. And despite the fact that we didn't get to witness a real monkey versus crocodile encounter, it was still a fun day out on the water enjoying the local wildlife and seeing some bits of Sri Lankan culture. The train ride back to the beach actually turned out to be really spectacular, as there was a beautiful sunset that seemed to continue for hours. And when I got to the beach, there was still this massive thunderhead high in the sky that was still catching all of the sunset colors long after the sun had gone down. Doing the wetlands tour was a fun way to spend my first day in Sri Lanka, and ending the day with sunset on the beach was the icing on the cake. And then I ended the night with my first ever Sri Lankan curry, which was quite delicious.